Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today's lesson is about conditional sentences, and in this lesson we will see the different types of conditional sentences, the structure of the conditional sentences as well as their uses. So let's see what conditional sentence is. According to the Oxford Learner's Dictionary, a conditional sentence is a sentence that begins with if or unless and that expresses a condition. Conditional sentences contain a subordinate clause, that is about the structure of a conditional sentence, that they contain a subordinate clause which is also called an if clause, and that clause expresses certain condition. For example, if it snows tomorrow. So this would be called an if clause or subordinate clause. And the second clause is main clause, which indicates the outcome of this condition, like when it snows tomorrow or if it snows tomorrow, school will be cancelled. Hence, school will be cancelled is main clause, and if it snows tomorrow, that is the subordinate clause. So this is the structure of a conditional sentence. Here there are some more points, like we have already seen that that is based on an if clause as well as a main clause. Like if it rains, we will get wet. And we could also invert the two parts of a conditional sentence so that the if part comes second. Most often that happens in questions, but that also happens in affirmative formations of sentences too. Like what will you do if you miss the train, and so on. Next, we will have a look at the types of conditional sentences. There are 4 types of conditional sentences: the zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, and the third conditional sentences. Now we will have a look at them one by one, and we will discuss them with the help of examples. Firstly, we will start with the use with the zero conditional sentences. So the first thing that is very important, and that is about the zero conditional sentences, that it expresses general truths or general situations in which one thing always causes another. So this is important, that this discusses zero conditional sentences. They contain general truths or situations in which one thing always causes another. And for example, when you smoke, your lungs are affected. We see that when you smoke, your lungs are affected. This is something which is a general truth, and that happens. The lawn gets wet when it rains. When it rains, the lawn gets wet. We could also invert the position of both of these clauses. Like when it rains, that may come first. The lawn gets wet, that may come second. So if you don't water the plants, they die. So this is about the usage of the zero conditional sentence, that is used to express general truths and general situations. Now we will have a look at the structure of the zero conditional sentence and the grammatical structure. So we see that the zero conditional sentences, they contain both the dependent clause and the independent clause, as we had already seen that the conditional sentences contain one dependent and one independent clause, one subordinate and one main clause. And here in zero conditional sentences, both the clauses are written in the simple present tense. Like we see in the previous example, the lawn gets wet. This is the main clause, and here the tense is present simple. When it rains, this is the subordinate clause, and here also the tense is present simple. In all of these examples, we see that both the clauses, they contain the present simple tense. They are written in the present simple tense. If you don't exercise present simple, you gain weight present simple. If you don't exercise if clause, subordinate clause, you gain weight the main clause. If you don't brush your teeth, if clause, that's written in present simple. You get cavities, that's also written in present simple. Now we will move forward towards the first conditional sentences, and we see that the first conditional sentences expresses those situations in which the outcome is likely but not guaranteed. So this is what makes it different from the zero conditional, as in zero conditional the outcome is not likely but the outcome is a must. That always happens. But here this is the outcome is likely but not guaranteed to happen in the future. For example, if you talk to someone about how you feel, you will feel better. So the outcome is likely. That's not necessary that whenever you would talk to someone, you would always feel better. Therefore, here the use of the first conditional sentence is there. If you are focused, you will achieve your goal. That is you may also see that this kind of a conditional sentence that also makes use of specific instances, that also talks about specific instances and not about the general truths. This is about the usage. Now if we will have a look at the grammatical structure, then we see that here simple present tense is used in the if clause, in the dependent clause, whereas the simple future tense is used in the independent clause. This is what makes it different from the zero conditional, because in zero conditional both the clauses are written in the simple present tense. Like if you rest, this is the if clause, subordinate clause, and you see that here the tense is the present simple. If you rest, you will feel better. You will feel better is the main clause, and this is written in the simple future tense. You will feel better. Previously, in previous examples, we see if you go out now, this is the if clause which is written in present simple. You will get wet in the rain. This is written in the simple future or the future indefinite. And in all the examples, you see that the if clause is written in the simple present, whereas the main clause is written in the simple future. And another way to make first conditional sentences is to use unless. And as with if, the word unless can never be followed by will. Like this is also, unless is also the subordinate clause like the if clause is. So therefore that would be written in this clause, that would be written in simple present but not in simple future. Like unless you hurry up, you see that this is written in simple present. You won't catch the bus, this is written in simple future. And in the other examples too, we will stay at home. This is the main clause which is written in simple future. Unless the weather improves, this is written in simple present. So we see that the first conditional that makes use of two tenses, which is the simple present and simple future in both of its clauses. We will move forward and we will have a look at the second conditional sentence. And the first thing that we get to know about the second conditional sentences is that they express the situations which are completely unrealistic and the things will not likely happen in the future. They express hypothetical situations or unrealistic events that are not likely to ever happen. For example, if I had a teleporting device, I would travel around the world in a jiffy. If I had a time travel machine, I could go back to my past and change a few things. If I were rich, I would spend all my time traveling, but I'm not rich, so I can't. So, we see that this has been used to express the hypothetical situations. Now, when we have a look at this grammatical structure, then we see that here the simple past tense is used in the subordinate clause or in the if clause. Like we see in the previous example, if I had a teleporting device. In if clause, there is the simple use of the simple past tense in the if clause. This is also called the subordinate clause. Had is the second form of the verb of have. And if I knew animation graphics, knew the second form of the verb, the simple past tense. And simple future tense in the independent clause which expresses the outcome. Okay, and in the main clause there is the use of the modal auxiliary along with the main verb, and that modal auxiliary could be might, would, could or should, and they would be followed by the main verb or the first form of the verb. Like, if I had a teleporting device, I would travel around the world in a jiffy. You see that in the if clause this is the simple past tense, whereas in the main clause this is the use of the modal auxiliary plus the verb, first form of the verb. If I had a time travel machine, similarly if clause, and here the use of the simple past tense, I could go back with use of the modal auxiliary plus first form of the verb. If I won the lottery, if clause, use of the simple past, I would buy modal auxiliary plus first form of the verb. And you may also invert the position, like if instead of saying if she saw a snake she would be terrified, you may say she would be terrified if she saw a snake. So that would also be the second conditional sentence. Hence we see that in the second conditional sentence that makes use of two tenses, which is the simple past tense in the subordinate or if clause, and the use of the modal auxiliary plus main verb in the independent clause. There is another example. If I inherited $1 billion, I would travel to the moon. And that talks about this second conditional, that talks about those situations which are not likely to happen or which are impossible. So hope that is clear. Now we will see what happens in third conditional sentence and what is the grammatical structure. So we see that the third conditional sentence is used to talk about impossible situations as in the second conditional, and we often use the third conditional to describe regrets. So that is used to describe regrets. The third conditional is used to talk about those situations that happened in the past and that also discusses their results in the past tense. Like, if I had been there, I would have surely helped you in one way or another. And that describes regrets. First thing that makes it different from the second conditional is that this is the thing that it talks about the action as well as their consequences or their results in the past tense, and that is also used to describe regrets. And that does not talk about the impossible, that talks about the impossible situations but their results in the past tense. And the second thing that makes it different from the second conditional is the use of is the grammatical structure. Like, we see that the grammatical structure of the third conditional is that here in the if clause the use of the past perfect tense is there in the if clause, whereas the modal auxiliary verb would, should, could plus have plus past participle in the independent clause. Whereas we see that in the second conditional the past tense, simple past tense is used in the if clause, whereas in the main clause modal auxiliary verb plus first form of the verb is used. So this is what also makes it different from the second conditional, the grammatical structure plus its use, because that talks about the regrets and the impossible situations in the past as well as the results in the past. Like, if we have a look, if you had told me you needed a ride, I would have left earlier. So if you had told me, use of the past perfect in the if clause, I would have left earlier. Would, modal auxiliary plus use of have plus third form of the verb. If I had cleaned the house, I could have gone to the movies. You may also invert the positions, like you could say we would have arrived on time if we had left earlier. This is not necessary that you needed to write the if clause first and then the main clause. You may invert the position of both. In the previous examples too, we see that if you had not fought with me, use of the past perfect in the if clause, everything would have been fine. So would plus have plus have been fine, because this is the passive construction. If the teacher had informed us earlier, this is the past perfect, we could have finished it in time. So this is the third conditional, and now we have a look at the mixed conditionals. In the mixed conditional, it's a kind of a combination of the second and the third conditionals in one sentence. When we want to make a hypothesis about the past that has consequences in the present, so you needed to remember this thing, that this is what makes it different from the third conditional, that this discusses about the action in the past and its consequences in the present, whereas in the third conditional we have seen that talks about the actions in the past as well as their consequences in the past tense. And you see that its structure would also be different from both the second conditional as well as the third conditional, because that makes use, in the if clause, that makes use of the past perfect tense, whereas in the main clause that uses the modal auxiliary plus verb, whereas this is not the case. This is not neither in the second conditional nor in the third conditional. For example, if you had studied harder, you would be at a higher level now. We have seen that if you had studied harder, this is the past perfect, and you would be at a higher level now. This is the would plus be, and we would be lying, this is the present, we would be lying on a beach, present main clause, if we had not missed the plane, past, which is used in the past perfect. So similarly, they would have much more confidence, main clause, if they had not lost so many matches, if clause, which makes use of the past perfect, and here modal auxiliary plus first form of the verb. So in these examples too, you may have a look and you may see the same structure. I would buy a house by the sea if I had won the lottery last week. Would buy, present and past action. This is what makes it different from the third conditional, the usage plus the grammatical structure. If we have a look at this table, then we see the uses as well as the grammatical structure and how that is different, because most often the people would get confused between the zero conditional and the first conditional. So what is difference between both of these is, in the zero conditional, that describes the known facts, that describes the general facts, general conditions, general situations, whereas in the first conditional that describes a possible situation and the result or the specific instance of something, firstly. Secondly, we see the grammatical structure is different, as in zero conditional that uses the simple present tense in both the main clause and as well as in the if clause, whereas in first conditional that uses will plus first form of the verb in the main clause and simple present in the if clause. If we have a look at the second conditional, then we see that this discusses a hypothetical condition and its possible result, and if we have a look at the grammatical structure, we see that it makes use of would plus would, could or should plus first form of the verb in the main clause and simple past in the if clause, whereas in the third conditional that also discusses impossible situations, but that also discusses their result in the past, and that makes use of would plus perfect plus infinitive. So that makes use of would, should or could plus have or first form of the verb, and in the if clause that makes use of the past perfect. Now if we have a look at the mixed conditionals, then we see that in mixed conditionals that discusses some impossible past situation and their result in the present. And about the grammatical structure, Past perfect is used in the main clause and present conditional is used in the present conditional means would, could or should plus first form of the verb in the if clause. So this is how we see that how their uses, if we get to know about their uses and plus their grammatical structure, then that would be helpful for us to identify the different kinds of conditional sentences. For example, here this is the exercise and I would take up only one or two instances and I would see that how you people are going to identify the conditional sentences. For example, if you get this sentence, if my parents had not consented to the surgery, my life would have been different. So we see that this is the if clause, and in the if clause if we have a look at the grammatical structure, then we see that that makes use of this had not. If my parents had not consented, we see that this is the past perfect. My life would have been different, would have been different. So would plus have, this is being used in the third conditional. Next we will see that if we have a look at this sentence like number 8, if you eat fast food every day you get sick. So you see that this talks about the general conditions. If you eat fast food every day, eat is the simple present tense and you get sick, get is also simple present. So what conditional sentence makes use of both the simple presents? That is the zero conditional, and that talks about the general situations where the outcome is guaranteed. And if we have a look at this, like if they stay indoors they will not become sick. They stay indoors, this is the simple present, and will not become sick, this is the simple future. And what conditional make use of the simple present and simple future? The first conditional. And here the outcome is likely to happen, that is not guaranteed, but that is most likely that it will happen. If I were a bird, I would happily fly around the world. So you see, if I were, this is the simple past, and I would happily fly, would happily would fly. So would plus first form of the verb. So what conditional make use of this? The second conditional. And now if we have a look at this is also the second conditional. So you see that this is how you are going to have a look at both the uses plus at the grammatical structure, and that's going to help you to identify the conditional sentences and the types of conditional sentences. Hope that is clear and you understood the main points about the different types of conditional sentences. That's all for today. Thank you.